You are listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Well, happy Wednesday evening, everyone. This is Scotty Roberts. Welcome to my show. It is the Intrepid radio program, and it's right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. You can go over and hear the audio stream, which broadcasts out to our national syndication and terrestrial radio stations, as well as iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and a bunch of other places. And you can go there by going to odyssey1.com, ODYSY1.com, and come over and join the simulcast in video over on my YouTube live stream. And that is at youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts, Mr. all spelled out. And join the live chat room there. It can get kind of lively sometimes. Not everybody always stays on topic, but that's the beauty. They can be talking about a lot of things as a family and friends, the Intrepids, followers of this program, and then they'll jump right into the topic if they see a good place where they need to make a comment. So come on in, join the chat room, join the live fun over there. And I am going to talk about a topic today that is interesting to me, and hopefully it will be interesting to you, and that is body language. I always think of when my older daughters, my 27-year-old daughters, who are twins, were growing up. Way back in the early 90s to mid-90s, it was the early 90s, you had The Little Mermaid, the original animated Disney cartoon. And there was always the line that comes to my mind when I hear body language anymore, because I heard The Little Mermaid played over hundreds of times, was Ursula the Sea Witch, when she's talking to Ariel, the Little Mermaid, and taking her voice in trade for giving her legs. And she's given her a specific amount of time to be able to win the affections of the prince. And now, why can't I remember his name? Not Charles, not Jonathan, not David, the prince. You know who he is. And she says, you've got to remember the importance of body language. And the music in the background, dum, bum, 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 as she shakes her hips. And so a vaguely sexual reference made in a kid's animated cartoon. These are the things that kept adults somewhat attached to the movies. And you see that a lot now, by the way, which is a topic all itself we may talk about sometime, is how these kids' movies, these animated movies, which are meant for kids, are really adult movies wrapped up and packaged in a way that kids can enjoy them, but also that parents can enjoy them. But anyway, body language. I wanted to talk about this, and did you know that body language, and by the way, I'm going to tie this into immigration. You'll see how we get there. That's coming down the road in this episode. So I'm building up to something here, but there's things I want you to know about body language. And how does your body language give you away? There was an interesting video that I saw, and you can go look this up. It was Ben Hansen was doing a voiceover on this, but he was examining Bill Clinton, former President Bill Clinton, on the Jimmy Kimmel's show, and the late night show with Jimmy Kimmel. I don't know what he calls his show. Is it the late night show? But they were talking, this was a few years ago, and Jimmy Kimmel was asking him questions, and interviewing President Clinton. It was a fun interview, but Jimmy Kimmel had mentioned, if I wanted to be the president, one of the first things I would do, he says, I would go in, and one of the first official acts would be to find out what's all this UFO stuff going on. And he started asking Bill Clinton about this. And Ben Hansen was doing a voiceover and stopping the video and showing places different things about Bill Clinton's facial tics, the way he moved his fingers or crossed his legs or moved his arms, or the corner of his mouth tweaked, or things like that. And it was a pretty good interview, and he was saying, well, here he's thinking this and feeling this. We know this and this about how he's approaching. It was all pretty straightforward stuff. And then they got onto the UFO stuff, and immediately he started noticing different facial tics, different movements of fingers, different shifting in the seat of his chair, and so on. And he pointed out how all these little nonverbals were ways that he was subconsciously revealing that he either had discomfort about the question, or he didn't like the question, or he had problems, or he was even not lying, but hiding things, not saying everything about something, meaning he might have been under mandate to not be able to say something. So, which is a very interesting thing when you get to the UFO topic. But just his body language was very telling. And your body language, if somebody knows what to look for, can sometimes really give away what you're thinking and what your attitude on something. And this is all about how and why other people might know what you're thinking and feeling, even though you don't verbally express it. Your body language gives you away. Now, do I have body language on this show? Probably. There are probably things that I do here. When I say I forget something I'm going to say, or I can't think of a word like I did yesterday with the word contentment halfway through the show, or when I'm telling you something that I might not have all the information about, but have a little glimmering and I want to share something, even though that's not my full understanding of something, you might see the way I shift, or the way my eyes move, or the way the corner of my mouth turns up or down, or the way I gesticulate. All of those types of things play into how we can read somebody. And if you're patient enough, on both ends of that, if you're patient enough and have your mindset about you, you can look for these things and notice them in other people. Or you can also find that you're doing things that you need to brush up on. One of my worst qualities was always looking somebody in the eye. I have no lack of confidence, but there were times that perhaps from the past, and as I was getting used to being in business, where I'd say hi to somebody and I'd look down as I'd shake their hand. I'd make eye contact, but it would come and go. And I realized I need to stop doing that. I need to look somebody in the eye. I need to make that eye contact and keep that eye contact. And so that was one of the body language tics that I had, and things like that. And so I started to learn what my body language was saying, and that way I could come across either more confidently, or come across more businesslike, or come across more interested. Have you ever, saying more interested, have you ever been in a conversation with somebody where you're thinking, oh my God, get me the hell out of this conversation? And the other person is either boring you to death, or you don't want to be talking with this person for whatever the reason might be. It doesn't have to be anything, anything evil or anything like that. You just don't want to talk to that person. They're wasting your time. And many times we'll look off, or we'll check our watch, or we'll do all kinds of things that are nonverbals that say, I'm bored as hell with you. Get me out of here. One of my things was, have you ever done here, I might shake the computer when I do this, but you ever done the leg shake? You ever see somebody doing the leg shake? And they're just sitting there. They could be eating lunch. They could be talking to somebody. They could be watching something. They do the leg shake. Now, I had a really hard time with that. I had always done the leg shake. And what I found out that meant is that you're you're done with the situation. You're bored. You want to get out of the situation, or you want to move on to something else. So I found I would consciously catch myself doing that. And I said, that's a body language signal that I'm bored with whatever the hell you're saying. And so get me out of here. So I would stop doing that. The same thing with, I started by saying talking with somebody that you don't want to be talking to, or whose information doesn't enthrall you, or you're bored with them, or you want to go do something else and somebody else has caught you up and you have to sit and listen to this person's long story and you're like, I'm not into this right now. And I would find that keeping eye contact with them was another way to overcome my ability to want to just show how bored I was with what they were saying. So I would try to engage, and I do that now. If you ever get me in conversation and I've got straight eye contact with you and I'm not saying a whole lot, it might mean that I am overcoming my ability to roll my eyes or walk away. So these are body language tics that we all have subconsciously that we use. And I think it's important for us to know about body language and the power of it for different situations in our life. Now, you don't always have to worry about body language when you're sitting at home with your partner or your spouse or your friends who are very close to you. They can read your body language. You know, you can give them an F off without even paying attention. It doesn't matter because you're close to those people. But when you're in business situations or presenting yourself, or something I tried to teach my own 10-year-old son in selling Cub Scout popcorn. He could not make eye contact. My son he's kind of, I don't want to say he's meek. He's maybe a little bit shy, but he's 10. He hasn't been out in the world. He doesn't know how to talk to people. And we'd be out selling popcorn, like when we had to set up, you've all seen it, setting up the tables at the outside of the shopping or the grocery store or the market or the whatever. And we'd sometimes he was better at door-to-door in our neighborhood than he was setting up at a store because he didn't like accosting people in public. I would show him, I'd say, son, you got to be confident. You can't stand with your hands like this, which he did a lot. You can't look down. You can't be quiet. You don't want to buy no popcorn, do you? You know, that doesn't sell popcorn. And I said, you want to show people that you're excited about what you're doing. I said, so I would show him. And I would say, somebody would come walking up and I'd say, good morning. Very loud, very forceful, very confident, very happy. And I would make eye contact. And I'd try not to do stupid small talk because that was a dead giveaway as well. I'd say, good morning. I said, how would you like to support your local scouts by buying some popcorn? And then they'd kind of shuffle over. And I'd say to them, I'd keep eye contact the whole time. And many times they didn't want to make eye contact with me. There were people who would walk by and you could tell they're veering their body contact away from you because they don't want to be sold anything. They don't want to be told anything, even if it's a good thing. And so, you know, even the 85-year-old veterans who will stand outside with the little poppies to support veterans of foreign wars. And all they're asking for is if you got anything in your pocket, throw it in the little tin here and you get a little flour. You've all seen those. And people will even avoid making contact with those because they don't want to be engaged by somebody. So their body language is very closed off. But with my son, people would come to the table and I'd say right away, I'd say, hey, you know, $20 is a lot for a bag of popcorn. But keep in mind, and I'd show them on the boxes of popcorn as printed, I said 73% of every dollar goes to support your local Cub Scouts, and the rest goes to the organization. I said, so don't think of it as buying a $20 expensive bag of popcorn. Think of it as I'm giving $20 to the Cub Scouts, and they're giving me this measly little bag of popcorn in exchange for it. And I could get people to laugh and so on. So that's a lot of words. But body language, I told my son, who was standing next to me, I said, put yourself out there. Be confident. I said, all they are is other people. I said, who cares what they think about what you're doing or what you think? I said, put your best foot forward. And so body language is the way we build our own confidence. I will say this, is that being in street theater for many years at the Minnesota Renaissance Festival was something that taught me confidence over a 15-year span. It gave me confidence on how to approach people. Because we'd be walking down the lanes and we'd have to approach people and entertain them. Or we had to just be outgoing and doing what we just didn't lower our heads and walk around. That we had a thing that we called donutting at the festival, where you'd have the costumed characters on the street. We'd all converge at a place on the street, and we'd start talking. We'd be kind of taking a little break, but we're standing out there and talking with each other, and we'd form a circle. And it was a donut. And this circle was closed off to the rest of the people. And you do it subconsciously. You ever do that? You're in a crowd and you stand, you're talking to your friends. We talk in circles when we stand around each other. But what we had to do with street theater was we had to open up that circle to a C shape, a semicircle. And we'd talk to each other this way. Because what we wanted to do was not give the body language message that we were closed off to the crowd. We were there to entertain them. And we always had to stay in character. And so many times we're talking about things and we're using our faux accents and things like that and standing out in the public because we had to draw the public in. That was our job, to entertain. So, body language. Finally getting to body language. There's 10 ways that your body language can give you away or also build your confidence. Can people read your body language like a book? And it's not really body language, not a true language, but people read it. There's no one single meaning to a particular nonverbal cue. There are, however, some cues that an astute person can use to infer what you're thinking or you're feeling. And here are some of those. And this is what I want to talk to you about before we get into our immigration topic and how body language has come out of immigration and the blending of cultures. And I'm not talking current immigration, that's included, but all of immigration, the blending and the migration. We'll get there, and I'll show you what I mean. Fake smiling. There's our first one. There's a nonverbal communication expert named Paul Ekman, and he distinguished between true smiles, what he calls the Duchenne smiles, and fake smiles. Duchenne smiles indicate true happiness. Fake smiles don't. You ever notice that in photographs? You can tell when somebody, a real estate agent on a billboard, has their face next to, they smile like that. Hey, I'm your happy real estate agent. Look at me, I'm happy. And is that a signal of happiness? It's a fake smile. It's for a photograph. You can do it. You can look at your own pictures. Everybody goes, hey, everybody, we're here at Disneyland or this haunted location or wherever we are. Everybody smile for the camera. And everybody smiles. Fake smiles don't indicate true happiness. We use fake smiles when we're trying to look amused, but really aren't, or when we're uncomfortable around somebody, but we want to appear like we're having a good time. What's the key between real and fake smiles? Both have the upturned corners of the lips, but in Duchenne, or real happiness smiles, the eyes become narrowed. The outer corners crinkle into what we call crow's feet. So if I'm smiling fake, and sorry for those of you listening only to the audio version of this on radio, you aren't going to be able to see this, but as I described it, a fake smile might look like this. And so I'm smiling, but my eyes are open because it might be a publicity shot for doing radio or for selling real estate or whatever your job might be, where if you need a headshot. Or it's when you're talking to people and you're like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And your corners of your lips go up and your eyes stay open and so on. When I find that I'm really smiling, I smile like this. My eyes narrow. You see the crow's feet on the sides of my face. You see my teeth, which I don't like to smile with my teeth. It's just never been a big thing for me. I don't know why, and I was never ashamed of my teeth. I just didn't smile with my teeth. I thought my face looked stupid. And so that's the difference. That's one of the first nonverbals I've got on the list here is fake smiling. We all do it, but the astute person is going to be able to tell whether your smile is genuine or your smile is pasted on. Now, many times I have a thing, it's not really a smile, and it's so subtle. If I see somebody I either recognize and don't know, passing, or I'm passing somebody in a store, and you make that brief eye contact, I might give a little smile, like, hey, and my lips curl in like that, and I do this hi. It's just polite. So not what we're talking about with the other kind of smiling, but there it is. Second thing we've got that is a noticeable body language issue is self-soothing. And this is a real easy one. When we're anxious, when we're stressed, when we're uncomfortable, we tend to engage in this self-soothing nonverbal cues. The hand rubbing or wringing, the hand-to-body contact, stroking your leg or your neck. It's our attempt to calm our anxieties through self-touching. You see this kind of thing all the time. I sometimes go, I go like this. I rub my eyes. I go around to the back of my neck. And you go, ay, 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 ay. I might do it with verbals, too. I might go, I almost uttered the Effenheimer, which I can't do on this show. But I'd go, F, or, bloody hell, or whatever it might be. So there's that nonverbal self-soothing. And we see people do it all the time. You could sit in a coffee shop for an hour and watch people. See a lot of people going, crap, or I'm studying for a test and I'm done. So there's a nonverbal. Number 3 is posture. It's posture. The way we carry ourselves is a subtle clue, but one that can give away our true feelings. When we're proud and confident, you usually roll the shoulders back and the chest puffs out a little bit. You become erect, so to speak. An erect posture gives away a confidence. Now, sad and dejected or lacking in self-confidence might be the slouched shoulders and so on. Some of this is pretty elementary stuff. I'm just going through some of the nonverbal cues, the 10 most apparent ones that are there. So when I meet somebody, when I'm trying to win a contract with somebody or meet somebody in business or I'm networking with somebody, I try to always, and I do this anyway, when I'm out in public, I catch myself slouching. And I try to always roll the shoulders back, erect the spine, and put forward. And that's what I told my son when he was selling with popcorn. Same thing. I said to my 10-year-old son, I said, don't stand like this. You're very closed in. I said, stand like this. I said, roll your shoulders back, do the things. So confidence, your posture gives away your confidence. So if you are, and I caught myself doing these things, and this is why I made the changes. So sometimes it's really easy to slouch. Just put it out there. Roll the shoulders back. Put the chest out. Bring the chin down a little bit. Erect the neck and say, hey, blah, blah, blah. I'm here, and I'm confident. And so that pretty much, the gaze behavior, that's one of the eyes are the window to the soul. They tell other people about our interest in them, our interest in what they're saying. Are we sizing them up with our eyes? Is there sexual attraction? That can be told very clearly in the eyes. Do we talk to them when they're talking, or do we look away? I already talked about that a little bit. So your gaze is a dead giveaway in body language signals as to what you're really thinking and what you're all about. And now I'm going to look you right in the eye and say, we got to go out for 2 minutes, and we'll be right back, and I'll give you my best fake smile. We'll be right back. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back from that break. I want to thank you for sticking it out and coming back. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to the Intrepid radio program right here on Odyssey Radio Network, and that's ODYSY1.com. You can go hear the audio version, the stream that goes out to all our network affiliates all around the world, and to some of our nationally broadcast terrestrial stations. So you can go over to the website and find all that out, and you can listen to the audio there. Now, also, you can come on over to my YouTube channel, where we simulcast every show, every night, and there is a live chat room, and you can watch the video of this program at youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. So, let's move on with what we were talking about here with body language. What does your body language say about you? What do you project to other people who might be savvy enough to understand some body language cues? Do you give out a confident, an involved, an attached body language? Or does your body language show you're lacking in confidence, or that you're wrought with anxiety, or that I don't really want to be here talking to you? And these knowing and understanding these cues that we naturally give out are ways to overcome that. And in a way, you have to kind of lie sometimes with your body language. You have to be in situations where you have to act a certain way. We may all be free spirits here listening to this show and over in the chat room, but being a free spirit doesn't mean we act without courtesy. And sometimes we show lack of courtesy, lack of respect, rudeness by the way we make eye contact, by the way we listen, and all of those things. So that's why I'm going through this body language. And we're going to get to something about immigration with body language. We ended with gaze behavior. And it's the way you don't want to stare at someone, especially if you're sexually attracted to somebody. You don't want to sit and stare. That becomes lechery to a certain degree. But others can tell something about our interest in them by the way we look at them. And again, is it sexual attraction? Are we sizing them up? Are we paying attention? Are we interested, involved? You can generally tell somebody who is interested in what you're saying by their gaze. Now, I kind of mastered this too well to the extreme, and that there are times I could be gazing right at somebody, perfect, undetached eye contact, and then they'll ask me a question about what they just said, and it's totally gone, meaning my brain was a million miles away, but I was keeping eye contact. At least I had the body language down. So you gotta kind of find the good balance there. There's shortfall signals is another one. These are the nonverbal cues that suggest we're underreacting. The fake smile is one type of a shortfall signal, that we're not really happy, we're not amused. Another shortfall is when we show limited or fake outrage at something someone has said. And so typically shortfall signals suggest that we're not as engaged in what's going on as we might or should be. One of the shortfall signals I found that's a verbal would be the response, wow. You ever had that in a conversation? I've done it on radio interviews. I've heard it on radio interviews. I hear it from interviewers who are not very good interviewers. They will use the word wow a lot. Now, there are times I've said wow, but I genuinely mean holy shit. And I'll say right there, I said, I don't mean to use the lackadaisical interviewer word, but wow. I'll always say that's impressive. And so I try to add more verbals around it. So there are nonverbal, these short signs that we're not very interested in somebody. You know, one thing I'll notice, I'm talking to somebody, we're all talking about a topic, and I go, you know, there was this thing that happened to me once, and all of a sudden everybody's looking at their phone or their you know, they look up and they give you the quick, or they're typing, and you realize nobody heard a word I just said. I spent 25 glorious seconds of my life answering that and giving my version of that, and nobody gave a good rat's ass about it. And I go, sometimes I catch people go, hey, Did you hear that? And so those nonverbals are the shortfall signs. Pupil dilation. Now, this is one we don't really have a lot of control over. It's a very subtle cue that only the most astute observers can detect, and that's the way somebody's pupils dilate. Do you know that our pupils dilate when we're interested in something or someone? But you've got to be really close and really engaged with somebody to notice that. So our disinterest can be shown through the way our pupils dilate or don't dilate. So displacement activities. When we're very tense or we're anxious, we engage in nonverbal behaviors that help us cope with anxiety. It's scratching your head, rubbing your hands, fiddling with jewelry, and other self-soothing behaviors. And these self-soothing behaviors are sometimes used by customs agents or law enforcement officials as signs of nervousness that suggest that someone might be guilty of smuggling or criminal activity. They mess with their rings. They're constantly, somebody, if you're looking for something to see if somebody's doing something illegal and they're doing all these things like adjusting glasses, rebuttoning a button, wringing hands, doing things like this, those are all nonverbal signs. I know whenever I go through customs, when I go to Egypt and I go to other places and I travel around, shoulders back, chest forward, confident talk, keep an eye contact, and I don't mess with shit. All right, so facial laterality. Laterality. That's a hard word for me. Laterality. So normally our face cues are lateral. When we smile, both corners of the mouth go up. When surprised, both eyes go open wide. When facial cues are non-lateral, it can suggest something's wrong. We're displeased, we're confused, we're perturbed. The raising of one eyebrow is a good example, suggesting that we either don't trust what the other one is saying or we're taken a bit off guard. Think of Spock in Star Trek. He'd always raise the one eyebrow. One would go down and the other one would go up. Non-lateral or facial laterality. And, fascinating, he'd say. Fascinating was his word for, you dumbass. Or it could be used for the far extreme was, I am fascinated. So if you ever see somebody go, fascinating, they might be, one great place I heard that word used, I'm going to use a movie reference. Do you remember Angelina Jolie as Lara Croft in the first Tomb Raider movie? Excellent. She was perfect for that role. Of course, I had a big crush for Angelina Jolie anyway. But her male assistant, his computer tech and geek, said something about they were on a long flight, and he said something to her. He's just prattling off. She woke him up when they landed, and he says, "Oh, this is the whole left side of me butt is falling asleep." And she turns and she goes, fascinating. So, that's a way that we can use. And the eyebrow went up. So, then there's nonverbal leakage. Nonverbal leakage. This is not a sexual act. This is not a weird thing. But body language expert Paul Ekman coined this term to suggest that when we're lying, we take great pains to cover any obvious nonverbal cues that might give us away. I told you, there were times where I'm lying sometimes when I'm trying to feign interest in somebody, and I'm just doing it to be polite, and I go out of my way. These nonverbal leakage takes place. When we're lying, we make sure to look the other person in the eye, to look confident, and to avoid obvious cues of nervousness. However, our discomfort at lying might leak out in those parts of our body that we can't easily control. We might shift our posture. We might engage in self-soothing behaviors. We might have a shaky tone of voice or become flushed. And a savvy detector of deception looks for those inconsistencies and less controlled nonverbals. And they're nonverbal cues to determine if you're lying or telling the truth. When I mentioned Bill Clinton being interviewed by Jimmy Kimmel, and they started talking about UFOs, he did things with his fingers. He had his finger poised like this on the arm of his chair. And if you're only listening, you can't see this, but his hand was on the arm of the chair, comfortable. But when he started doing this. He started doing a couple of finger shifts and tapping and stuff like that. And it was a very slight nonverbal cue that showed he was uncomfortable. And there were other things, the shifting in his seat and so on, the crossing and uncrossing of legs, all of that stuff. Now, the 10th one I've got here is tie signs, T-I-E, tie signs. These are nonverbal cues that demonstrate to others that we're being possessive with another individual. Say you're interested in engaged in a conversation with some stranger at a party, and another person approaches. You may move closer to the person you're talking to, your target, so to speak, perhaps even touching them as a tie sign, displaying ownership. I own this conversation, douchebag, but back off. And when we want to demonstrate our connection to lovers or others we're close to, we may hold hands. We may put an arm over the shoulder or around the waist. We might move closer to demonstrate that we're tied to one another. Sometimes you can see this if you're a jealous person, and I've done this in the past. I'll be honest. I'm very confident with my wife. Totally trust my wife. Confident about what she does and how she acts in public. But there were times, and maybe sometimes are times, when I see other guys, obviously not aware she's married to me, we're in a social gathering or something, and I see other guys hit on her. I may just walk up behind her and cross behind her and do something like very obvious to the other person talking to her, touch her on the ass, or rub my hand across her shoulder as I'm going by, and I go, "Hey, honey," and I keep going. And I feign disinterest in the other guy, where what I'm really doing is making this tie sign to show the other guys, "Hey, dude, hands off, my woman." And so we all do that in certain respects. So all of these things, these are all these nonverbals that we do that can give away what you're really thinking, and that can give away to the other person, or things that you can be aware of in yourself. And I've got some more things I wanted to talk about here, about the things you don't talk about in public, like money, like politics, like sex, like religion. Everybody says, don't talk about politics and religion. Well, part of my stock and trade is talking about politics and religion, sometimes sex, and sometimes money. And so the idea is, don't talk about your money. I'm so poor. Oh, God, Now, I get in that trap, too, because I'm a freelance artist, and I sit and talk with other people who have their own businesses, and you talk about, well, how do you make that happen? How do you make that not happen? And you start getting into horror stories. Yeah, I had this guy that said he was going to pay me and all of a sudden, you talk about money. And but if you've got it, it's not about flaunting. That's the point I'm getting at with this. You don't flaunt. You never talk about money and flaunt how much money you have, how much money they have, that they're assholes because they have more money than you. And no one cares how much you made on your bonus. You're sitting somewhere, I made a $600 bonus. And the other guy goes, I made a $15,000 bonus at Christmas, and blah, blah, blah. Nobody cares how much money you made or what your annual income is before taxes. I made $73,000 after tax last year. Or I was just hired for $92K because I'm worth something. And so it's tacky. It's conceited. I promise you, nobody gives a flying rat's ass what you make. Nobody wants to hear it, especially if they make less than you. So those who actually have money and don't flaunt it are the people that are great to be around. Don't get me wrong. I'm really happy for those who've been blessed with generous means, but it's just plain rude to brag about it. I am doing very well financially, and you're not. I wish you could be where I am. So, you see a guy driving a Bentley with a Costco-sized package of paper towel in his front seat. Homeboy's driving a Bentley and still going shopping. So if you don't have money, you really shouldn't talk about money. It's very uncomfortable for someone to say, I can't afford whatever. We do things. When I ran the Paradigm Symposium, and we'd say, well, I had so many comments when we put up a public post for people oh, I'd love to go to your event, but I just can't afford it. Maybe next year or the year after. And I understand not having money, but the nonverbal side of that verbal is one that you're letting the world know how poor you are. That's just as distasteful as telling somebody how rich you are. Don't make it everyone's business by extending that information out there. That's just something you shouldn't do. Now, you know me, I'm very into politics. I pay attention to what's going on in the world. I'm very adamant about my political views. And it would have to be a very rare occasion for you to find out what my political party was or who I'm voting for in this upcoming election. Not. Because I'm very open and because I don't care. They say don't talk about politics. Politics begin arguments. Even if you're the person, after you and the person you're speaking to have similar views. Sometimes it creates arguments. Not everyone has the same opinion. And this goes for many different topics. For me, I got no problem because I do a radio show and I do it with Rocky, and I have said I try my damnedest to avoid politics. You don't know how close to the tip of my tongue talking about current politics is for me on this show, but I really try to avoid it. The closest I came was to spend 3 days talking about what impeachment is, what it was historically, the history of the current impeachment process, and how it came about, without trying to be too overly political about it. Knowing civics, knowing your Constitution, is not politics. Politics is rendering your opinion about those things. And it can be rude. I for one, will never shy away from talking about who I voted for, why I voted for that person. If you want to be private about that, that's your own business. And maybe that's a good thing to be, but in the business I do, I'm very open about it. And frankly, I was always open about that kind of stuff anyway. Sex, don't kiss and tell. That's really it. That's simply, don't do it. Unless you're having a discussion with close friends who won't mention anything to anyone, don't talk about who you had sex with over the weekend. That positions you as you. What positions you used, whatever else, what happened, what were the particular. You don't talk about those things. If people find that disgusting, and it's classless. Unless you're Rocky Stucci talking about buttholes and nipples. That's what he does. And, when we talk about things like that on Rocky's show, it's for fun. It's for humor. It's in jest. You don't hear any of us talking about, there are times my wife will walk right behind this computer to the other side of the office and she'll flash me. Or she'll strip naked and walk in and smile at me very coyly. So when that happens, sometimes I share that on the radio and go, oh, my wife just walked by naked. I'm going to bring this show to a close. It's all for good humor. But that's different than talking about everyone we had sex with, all we know about. We all know what it's like. Everybody knows what sex is, to a certain degree or other. You don't have to tell me. So now, it's different with locker room talk. Pardon my phone alarm there. It's different with locker room talk. We all kind of do that when we're with the right people. So talking about, what, all the variables. Just don't do it. It's not good. Religion. For the same reasons you shouldn't talk about politics, you shouldn't talk about religion. But I talk about religion and theology in the sense of trying to understand it, compare it. just did a big series on the historical Jesus versus the Gnostic God-men all throughout history, the ancient world. And so that's a little different than talking about religion. Complaints. That's another one. Seriously, don't do it. Everyone has problems. Everyone has something going on in their life. Unless you're lying on a psychiatrist's couch, don't talk about what's plaguing your emotions. Discussing something that's bothering you with a close friend or relative is perfectly normal. It's great to get all your thoughts out. Let things out there. But in social media today especially, how turned off by you, or do you find yourself in that what's the word for visual mastication? Misogynist. No, not misogynist. What the hell is the word I'm looking at? Here again, I'm stuck on a word. We're voyeurs. That's the word I'm looking for. We like to be voyeurs of other people's problems. Maybe that's a hobby of yours. So that's why you're on social media. You want to find out a place where you can hear about everybody's problems and all this vivid detail that you don't really care about? Go on social media. Now, that's different than somebody coming on social media and saying, hey, we had a fire in the house, we got a problem, hey, my grandma dies, please pray for her, or is going to die, blah, blah, blah. You know the kinds of things. But sitting and writing paragraph after paragraph about your problems, nobody really wants to hear it. You know why? Everybody's got problems. So keep it short, keep it to the point. You had a bad day, that's fine. This happens all the time. But don't go to Facebook and Twitter and tell everybody about your bad, horrifying day. Don't be the Debbie Downer. More people will wish misfortune on you than offer their condolences if you're constantly being an emotional train wreck in public. Keep your train wrecks at home. Keep your problems. Another one with me are the problems of married people. Don't get on social media and spill your vehement spew about your spouse or somebody else. Nobody wants to see that. Keep it at home. Some things are private. Keep them private. That doesn't mean you don't mention that there are problems or things going on and all of that stuff. We've all got stuff. We've all got shit. Life is shitty. Life's a piece of shit. It's what you do with it. And it's like the song from The Life of Brian. Always look on the bright side of life, because life's a piece of shit when you think of it. Blah, 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 blah. And so that's life is. It's what you do with it. And so all of this stuff I'm talking about now, with about 4 minutes left of this show, was to lead up to talking about migration patterns and how they predict emotional expressiveness. We express ourselves emotionally. We use body language. All of these things are displays of emotion that are related to a nation's history of immigrant diversity. And so I once heard a story, and perhaps it's apocryphal, about how a Persian Gulf War could have been avoided if American and Iraqi diplomats had known more about cultural norms regarding the public display of emotions. Way back in 1990, I remember this. I was very active politically in 1990, and we're talking almost 30 years ago now. At the direction of Saddam Hussein, the Iraqi army invaded Kuwait, its neighbor to the south, in an attempt to control Kuwaiti oil fields. President George H.W. Bush, Herbert Walker Bush, Bush Sr., quickly formed a coalition of 39 nations to oppose Iraq's land grab. Now, in January of 91, James Baker, the U.S. Secretary of State, and Tariq Aziz, Iraq's foreign minister, met in Geneva, Switzerland to discuss a diplomatic solution to this whole crisis. Now, seated next to Aziz was Saddam Hussein's half-brother, who periodically called Baghdad to give Hussein his assessment of the negotiations. Now, James Baker, our Secretary of State, very reserved man, very quiet, very succinct, not outgoing. He was reserved. He rarely raised his voice or showed emotion, said very clearly and plainly that the United States and its coalition partners would launch a counteroffensive if Iraq did not pull its troops out of Kuwait. Boom. Now, unfortunately for the Iraqis, they paid too little attention to what Baker said and too much attention to how he said it. Hussein's half-brother reported to Baghdad, "The Americans will not attack. They are weak. They are calm. They are not angry. They are only talking." This is the way, and people talk about the way President Trump responded to the killing of al-Baghdadi. He was posturing himself. He was using language that they use, talking about dying like a dog. This is the way those terrorists talked. And so 6 days later, back in 1991, President Bush unleashed Operation Desert Storm. 2 months later, more than 150,000 Iraqis had lost their lives, and the region had sustained $200 billion in property damage. The Iraqis obviously misread James Baker. And I hate to say it, but we're out of time. I'm going to pick this story up tomorrow. We'll talk about this a little bit more. You stay tuned. We're going to take a 23-hour break, and we'll be right back. Thanks for listening. Is that a real smile? Raised eyebrow? Corner of the lips go up? Have a good night.